Hello everyone, thank you so much for taking your time to join us. Another edition of FMD Live here for you. Interesting week it has been. And yes, in all honest truth, as people continue to interact and citizens continue to engage and read about the movements of what is going on in the world of politics, one is certain that in the days ahead, it's not just going to be the politicians that will be involved in the politics of the day, but as much as the citizens. Welcome to FMD Live. I am Femi T. Amele. Well, today let's talk about vote buying for a moment. Yeah, it's that very moment when there's a trader or there's a buyer and there's somebody who's willing to sell. Two parties involved. Two people willing to transact just the same way you stand by to say, I want to buy kuli kuli, or you want to buy granite, and somebody will provide the money and the other person will provide the product. I'm sorry I have to use such a demeaning example, but that is how this day, after every 4 years, possibly this is how the trade system looks like over and over again. Not very nice, not very truthful, not very relieving, but that is the system it looks like we're setting ourselves for. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, as we know them, the electoral body in charge of elections in Nigeria, have been brilliant in much of their masterpiece in conducting elections across the country. They were there in Ondo State, there was Edo State, there was Anambra State, and of course, who can miss out on Ekiti State in itself? It's one of those elections that is historic in its nature. But then, as they did make their game better, did make the exercise better, and even the electoral process even significant better, by avoiding the issues of ballot snatching, somebody getting ahead of the polls to thumbprint, and the likes of all the other issues we've experienced in Nigeria in the time past. Well, as you know, when you close one door of evil, sometimes other evils come along. Even the Bible talks about it when it says you bind one demon and then it goes in search of 7 other demons to get it out. Well, vote buying may just be that new political demon that is now the plight of the electoral process in Nigeria if you're not careful. Seeing just a little bit of it in Ekiti State, and now we can only imagine the step before the 2019 election, the next election, which is Osun State, whether that same process will take place. But why do people choose to sell their votes? That's a very fundamental question one should ask. Why do people choose to vote for somebody for the sake of money and reject voting for another for the sake of money? And by the way, vote buying definition goes both ways. You could be paid not to vote for someone, and you could be paid to vote for another. It just depends on how much of your political opponent or your enemy chooses to come at you at any point in time. So this variation or this approach becomes quite necessary to understand. But some of the things that drive citizens behind the idea of vote buying will have to be our economic conditions. Well, that sounds like a big phrase, but then it's our living conditions. Even better is the fact that there's poverty to deal with day in, day out. Poverty, which unfortunately is spread in different ways across the country. If you're in the northern part of the country or in some states in the north, there's that experience where people can so much condition themselves to be in a state of not knowing how much they deserve as citizens to live on minimum wage, to the extent that they feel whatever is available is just fine enough. In other words, they cannot scale or measure the level of poverty. So when anybody registers or comes for their vote, they may presumably feel it's a trade that can be done. Now let's go down to the likes of the southwestern part of the country, for example. There you find people who may claim, and I say claim, it's an arguable claim, to be educated. Educated because they know the implication of selling their vote, but yet still comply to do so. If peradventure you want to go the likes of the eastern parts of the country, people will sell votes in favor of candidates because they feel these candidates will get their resource control closer to them, supposedly. And many times this does not happen. So citizens somehow are putting a new game, changing the playing rules around the electoral process, changing how one should think what citizens should do when the election finally comes around. Do we start to deal with the puzzle that it is long old problem? No, the new problem is going to be part of the